All right, welcome back to Coffee with Tony 2026. Glad to have you. So if you tuned in last week, you know that this week's episode is going to be kind of going off of last week's. Last week I talked about all the different things that I'm doing to beat cancer, how I'm beating cancer. Hopefully some of that information was beneficial to you. But this week we're going to talk about why we need to advocate for research for this, why research needs to get done. And, you might recall last week I didn't talk about any kind of dosing or how much grams I'm taking. And that's because you can't, because without clinical trials, they don't know where to even start. I think most of the animal trials, the animal experiments, a lot of them start at, I think it's 1 gram per kilogram, or per 2 kilograms of body weight. And that's a lot for a person. Like when I was 185 and I checked into this, I would have needed 42 grams, I think, for most of the supplements if I went by that, which obviously I don't. So I'm not going to talk about dosing, but I brought that up to let you know there's a reason why we don't have any dosing information. That's because there's no clinical trials being done. And, all the research I posted there for you, if you had a chance to look at it or talk to your doctors about it, that's probably the one thing you noticed. I mentioned it up front as well. There's just not a lot of human clinical trials. And that's frustrating for me because I have a little bit of understanding of how the process is supposed to work. And when I was looking at this, I saw that, we see that in laboratory studies with different cell lines, we see that there's benefits, whatever those benefits were. You could refer to the previous video. But we know there's benefits, so then you move on. And they were moving on, and the animal trials were getting done, right? And we were finding that the benefits were similar to what we were seeing in the laboratory studies. Now, this is where it gets frustrating for me because that is justification to moving research forward. You don't stop when you get, we see the things happening, there's benefits. We see that in laboratory studies. We see that in animal studies. You don't just stop. That's your justification to go forward and do the human clinical trials. To start, I guess it goes different phases. I'm not 100% sure on it. But I think phase 1, they might try a certain amount, and then it goes to phase 2, phase 3. I don't know much about it, so I'm not going to speak on it, except that I know there is different phases of human clinical trials. They're just not getting done. And you might think, well, how do you know that there's a process? How do you know that that's, supposed to happen that way? And, while it is logic, the truth is, when I was getting my master's degree in counseling, I had to do a research and statistics class. And for that class, we had to do a project. I would call it a research proposal. They didn't call it that. They called it a project because it wasn't necessarily a proposal. We had to set it up as if we were doing the research. We had to set up the statistical test that we were going to use, all the, we had to set it up right. It had to be sound methodology. But part of that also was the intro. And the intro is where you talk about the background of the problem. And then this is also where you want to get the justification for this, because in that intro you don't just talk about X amount of million people are going to die in the next couple years, or die over the course of a year, from cancer. You do that, but then you also include previous research that's already been conducted. And the idea is this is what's been conducted, that's been done, but we still need to look at this. And so this is such a logical step to go to human clinical trials for all of these that I talked about last week, that it makes no sense to me whatsoever that this is not getting done. There are some of these supplements that I've read about early 2000s. I think I may have been researching for, actually I think it was my uncle at that time had brain cancer, and the internet was kind of newish. I had access to it. I was looking at some stuff, and spirulina, there's been studies, the animal studies have been done far back, mid-90s. At that point, that was kind of newish, but ready to, it's like, hey, we need to keep moving on this. We should have kept moving at that point. And so here it is 30-some years later from those studies that I saw dating back to the 90s, and very little has been conducted with spirulina. I think there are some human clinical trials, but it's not really aimed towards using it as a chemotherapy. It's more as an add-on therapy, which is fine. I guess technically maybe that is the next step. So something is getting done, but I mean the years that it took to get there is ridiculous. And so anyway, I know from my own personal experience at college level, master's level class, that there should be a progression in this research. Research shouldn't just stop. And I have my own theory about that, and I'll tell you about that in a second. All right, I'll tell you about it now. I think I covered everything I wanted to in that other section. So why is this happening? I could tell you, I believe it's money. Pharmaceutical companies make a lot of money from cancer treatments. And I could tell you from my own personal experience why this became an interest to me was as I was going through the course of my treatments and different surgeries that I have had over the last year and a half, not quite a year and a half, year and 4 months, whatever. I kind of look at my portal and I see what it costs, and I know my healthcare is paying out quite a bit of money every time I walk in there to get my chemo. I think the pharmaceutical side of it, just to buy the chemo, is like $50,000, and then there's all the other stuff, the test and everything they do, and so there's definitely big money, and I'm one person, and that's my own experience from what I'm seeing from my medical records there, that I could tell in my portal what, how much that is. There's an article, you'll see it in the links down there. There's an article about the rising cost for anti-cancer treatments. And according to that article, as of 2023, we spent $99 billion a year. 99 billion, not million, but 99 billion for cancer treatments. That level is expected to rise to 180 billion by 2028. We're in 2026 now, so I'm imagining we're somewhere in the middle, about 120, based on that information. And so, that's an 80% rise in cost over 5 years. So, I mean, it's not like it's just a lot of money now, But this is like a huge growing industry. There is a lot of money in this. And it's not just the pharmaceutical companies that are getting the money. You know, you've got to be naive if you don't think that doctors are taking kickbacks for prescribing some of this. You know, let's be honest. Politicians, pharmaceutical companies have politicians up in lobbyists up in Washington all the time. So there's probably a lot of politicians getting some campaign contributions and things like that as well. And, you know, you could even go to some of the organizations that, you know, that either give out the grant money or, you know, approve certain treatments like, you know, the FDA. You know, they probably have a lot of folks that have money invested in pharmaceutical companies. Now, that's just me imagining this because I'm contextual and, you know, and when I put everything into the context, and this is just what I know with my background, the context of this says people are making money, and therefore some people in certain positions that control the money for the research probably don't want the research being done. So, what are we at time-wise? 11 minutes? Okay, I'm going through this very fast, faster than I anticipated, which I guess is good because I won't have to worry about my camera shutting off. But I don't think this one's going to go 30 minutes. All right, NCBI article. Talks about that. Okay. Oh, and another thing, contextually, it's not just prescribing the chemo medication, but then there's also, like anybody, if you know anybody who's had chemo, or radiation for that matter, pick a treatment. It doesn't even need to be cancer related. There's always some sort of side effects from any, especially chemo. I could tell you, personally, I've dealt with neuropathy, and so then you get these medications like that are prescribed to offset these side effects. So then, you know, certain pharmaceutical companies are making money off of that, and then you know, and it just goes on and on. You know, those side effects or those treatments for the side effects, who knows? They could have side effects that then they prescribe something else for. I don't take a lot of, if you're not haven't caught on yet, I try not to take a whole lot of stuff that the doctors prescribe because I have more faith. I said it in my intro. I'm a believer. I'm a born again Christian. I believe that God creates better medicine than man. And when you look at all the herbal supplements and stuff like that, that comes from the ground, that comes from God's making, not man's, you know, making. And so, yeah, so they lose money on that too, if, or they're making money on that right now. Excuse me, let me shut this off. Okay, so that was my rant. I apologize, but I did warn you last week when I told you. I said there's going to be a rant based on my experience and frustration and my background, knowing how things should happen. I got it out of the way, and you know, like it or not, I believe there's truth to that, and I think some of you might believe that as well. But to be fair, I did want to look into it a little bit and see, you know, where where can I find some information on where, how much money goes to different types of research and how much is going to research conducted with, these herbal supplements. And I cheated on this one when I Googled it. I actually I'm going to quote some information from the AI, Google AI, so I apologize. But there was a link there, and I'll share it. It goes back, there's a website, governmenthumantrials.org or something like that, or humantrials.gov or something, I think it was. But the AI response with Google says that less than 2% of the research grants that go out for cancer research are aimed towards, or actually I believe that's towards any treatment, not just cancer. Less than 2% are approved for the herbal supplements. And so when you think about that, and there, I believe there was 26 projects that have been done in the past since since I think it was 2016. So 10 years, 26 projects. It's just not happening, folks. I mean, it's just not happening. Now, I'm going to be fair. I found those numbers, and there was a link to go to the website for those government trials, and you could search and then figure out the numbers yourself. I'm going to be honest, I did not feel like doing all that. I'll take AI's word for it. But if you're a statistician and you enjoy that, please feel free to do that. I just had no desire to do that, so I just wanted to be honest about the information as well, too. And so that's what I found out with that. But then I also found out that there is an actual organization dedicated towards giving out grants for research on alternative medicines. And it's called the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. So the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. And they approve grants for funding for research for herbal supplements, things like that, for different conditions. And so I thought it was interesting that most of the research, as you would expect, part of the name is integrative health. So a lot of the research that we do in America anyway goes towards complementary, using like some of those supplements that I talked about last week, using some of those as an add-on therapy. Like for ALA is one of the ones that it has a bunch of cancer property or cancer benefits, for treatment, but it also helps with neuropathy. So you would find a lot of things like that being researched from that organization. But what I also found interesting is that we give a lot of money out to other countries to do research. And I thought about this, because Asian is at the top of the list, Asia. And I thought, well, in a way it makes sense, because the pharmaceutical companies, they're not going to want to do the research, because they're going to lose money. We just talked about how many billions of dollars they get for these treatments. So they're not going to do it. Then you have agricultural companies that, produce and harvest these things. So they might have an interest, but they don't really have the facilities. And, they don't have the doctors and everything that it takes to do all this. So they're not going to do it. Most of the research grants would be probably spent just building the facilities or buying the facilities and equipment. So they're not going to do it. So for me, it kind of makes sense to send some of this research overseas, like especially with Asia. Asia, it's when it comes to these herbal supplements, it is such a big part of their culture. So it makes absolute sense to me to do that. But then when I'm reading about this, the information we're getting back we can't use because it's either incomplete data with no results, which I have a pretty big opinion on that one because you do research to get the results, right? So I don't understand why that is acceptable and why, like, okay, it happens once. All right, let me talk to somebody, get it fixed. But it sounded, based on what I read, that is kind of the norm. Like, we can't even publish this, like NCBI and PubMed and these places that would publish these journal articles. We can't publish them. We can't use them because, they're just, the information's not there. We don't even know what the results are. We don't know if the methodology is sound. So we can't use the information that that is being produced from these grants. And then I also read that sometimes language, it comes back in their language, like Chinese or Japanese, kanji, whatever that is, their language that they use. I know it's different between Japan and China, so one of them I think uses kanji. But anyway, it comes back in their language, and then, we can't use it, So that's frustrating too, because when you put that into context, go back again to the context of who's making money, even though it makes sense to send it that way for the reasons I talked about, because I'm trying to be fair about this, but at the same time, when you put it into context, like, shouldn't we be getting something back from that, I guess is my point. Shouldn't we be getting something useful that we can then at least publish and see if there is somebody in America, like an American company, a pharmaceutical company, that wants to take on the research and verify it, and then eventually maybe go to the FDA. I don't think that would happen because of the money, but, or even maybe somebody could take that as part of their, make a proposal to the FDA. I don't know what the process is to getting something approved for actual medical use, like stuff that pharmaceuticals develop and research, versus getting something approved as an alternative medicine, because I know there are things that are approved as an alternative medicine. So I don't know what the process is. Could we take that research and send it to the FDA and see if we can get something approved as alternative? It's just, we should be getting something to be able to use. And it's not. And when you put it into context of money, I don't think that there are people that are upset about that. So that's why I believe it's not happening, and the things that are happening are kind of messed up, is because I don't think it's meant, I don't think people would really want it done, just to be honest with you. Okay, so why is this important? What does it matter? Why is it important, and what can we do? So, I think I ran out of time, and this is going to be 24 minutes. Oh, we're doing good. We're really good on time. This should be perfect. All right, sorry about that. Got distracted. So anyway, why is this important, and why should we advocate for it? It's important because people are dying. It's just that simple. According to the World Health Organization, 10 million people a year die from cancer, various forms of cancer. Okay? That's 27,000 a day, roughly. And, those are people's lives, that are lost. And when it it irks me and frustrates me even further because, number one, I'm dealing with this. So I'm just fortunate, by the grace of God, that my treatment's going in a good direction. But I'm also humbly aware that, excuse me, I'm humbly aware that that is not the case for everyone. And so that's a lot of people. But then it's on top of that, it's 19 million new diagnoses per year. And 2 million in America alone, every year. And so there's a lot of reasons for this research to get done. And, excuse me. And also resistance. Cancers have the ability to create resistance. So the more treatments, the more, even if it's alternative medicines, the more things you have available to attack this, the better off it's going to be for everybody who has to deal with it, because there's always other avenues. And there's been some development like immunotherapies and stuff like that. Those are good. But there's surgery, chemo, radiation, and immunotherapy that are used to treat cancer. And so you want more avenues, because you don't, you want to be able to deal with resistance within the cancer. And so it's important to get it done. And now, as a matter of fact, I think it was the World Health Organization as well that said 50% of cancer patients develop resistance, or the cancer they have develops resistance to the treatment that they're using. So, it's time. I know there's a lot of money, and I'm a capitalist. I'm for making money, but I think when you look at 10 million people dying a year, I think you got to put the money aside at some point and do something better than what you're doing, especially when there is stuff that could work better, and could be less toxic to our organs. Because, as I said in my previous video, when I talked about ROS and toxicity, cancer treatments like chemo, they're not just toxic towards the cancer. They attack the body as well. So, anyway, what can you do about it, right? At the end of this, I went through all of that to tell you my belief. It's not happening. It's clear it's not happening the way it's supposed to. And my belief as to why I believe that's happening, and why it's important to advocate. And now I'm going to tell you who you can contact. I'll have the links below. But the Health and Human Services website, that link that I provide for you there, should be right on the front page, right towards the top. There should be a Contact Us. Click on Contact Us, and then you can go to that page. I think there's phone numbers, but I think there's also a little portion at the bottom there where you can send them a quick message and just tell them you're concerned about, you do think there's stuff out there that works to treat cancer, and there's research that gets to a certain level and it's not getting done, and advocate to get that done. Then you have Congress.gov. Congress.gov is where you can go to, and actually the link that I provided there is actually Congress.gov Find Your Member. And so that you can go there and you can search based off of your zip code, I believe, and find out who your members are, and you can write them in a similar way that I just described for the human health and human services. You can write them, voice your concern, tell them, research isn't getting done the way it's supposed to, what can we do about it, et cetera, et cetera. All right, well, thank you for listening to my rant. This has been Coffee with Tony, excuse me. And I hope you reach out to your folks there and advocate for this research, especially if you know somebody. I think it means more to you if you know somebody that's actually dealing with it. And so, tune in next week when I'll be talking about how cancer has changed my life. And I'm going to use that as a lead-in to the next 2 episodes, which talk about emotional intelligence. Because when your life changes, and it's not just me, people go through changes, retirement, empty nesters, stay-at-home moms when the kids move out of the house. Everybody goes through different changes in life stages. But I'll be speaking from my point of view, and I'm going to use that as a lead into emotional intelligence as well, and also maybe give you some tips on how to deal with your changing situation or your roles in life. All right. Thank you again for tuning in. This was Coffee with Tony 2026, and I hope to see you next week. Thanks again.